Does he have us muted? I guess he does. No?
For those who have joined already, we're going to give it just another minute before we get started. All right, everyone, we're going to get started. And first of all, good morning. And thank you all for joining us today. We're very excited about this event. My name is Tom Marciano. For those of you who don't know me, I'm president of the New York State Wireless Association. We're so glad to see the fantastic participation in this first of hopefully several joint webinar events held by New York State Wireless Association and the New Jersey Wireless Association. I'd also like to thank all of the members who've helped us put this together. As many of you know, we're volunteers, both organizations, and putting these types of events together, as well as obviously the ones that we do in person, take a lot of volunteers to make them happen. So thanks to everyone who participated in this. I wanted to let everyone know that we'll be recording and posting this event on our respective websites so that you'll be able to go and see them at any time in the future. Another note, I wanted to add that our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who's been affected by COVID-19 and all of those working on the front lines to combat this terrible pandemic. Many of our member companies are providing essential services for the wireless industry during this pandemic, and we keep all of you in our thoughts and prayers. I'd ask that everyone please to continue to take this very seriously and stay safe out there. Today, it's my great pleasure and honor to have FCC Commissioner Michael O'Reilly join us to discuss several important issues affecting the wireless industry. Commissioner O'Reilly has been a friend of both NYSWA and NJWA for several years and is truly passionate about the industry. Commissioner O'Reilly was nominated for a seat on the Federal Communications Commission by President Barack Obama on August 1st, 2013, and was confirmed unanimously by the United States Senate on October 29th, 2013. He was sworn into office on November 4th, 2013. November 4th, 2013. On January 29th, 2015, he was sworn into office for a new term following his renomination by the President and confirmation by the United States Senate. Prior to joining the agency, Commissioner O'Reilly served as a policy advisor in the office of the Senate Republican Whip, led by U.S. Senator John Cornyn. We're very pleased to have dubbed him New York's favorite son, as Commissioner O'Reilly received his bachelor's degree from the University of Rochester. While Commissioner O'Reilly's talk was pre-recorded 2 days ago, he is live with us on Zoom chat and will be answering questions for us in real time. One other statement I wanted to make, New York State Wireless Association recently instituted a scholarship fund with SUNY Impact, and we're very, very, very excited about this. It's going to be rolling out next month, I believe, and we'll be funding it for at least 4 years and it will be applied to both associate and bachelor's degrees within the SUNY system. So we're very, very excited about it. Lastly, we'd like to thank our sponsors who continue to support NYSWA and the New Jersey Wireless Association. Without them, we would not exist and would not be able to provide valuable educational events like this one. We'll be scrolling through the sponsors a couple of times towards the end of the event as well, but I'd ask that you please recognize the companies that continue to sponsor us. New Jersey has their annual sponsorships. New York does event sponsorships. And again, without the support of these folks, we wouldn't be doing things like this and all the other events that we hold. And with that, let's get started.
I'm Mike O'Reilly, the Federal Communications Commission. It's my absolute pleasure to join you this lovely summer day. Let me start by thanking the New Jersey and New York Wireless Associations for inviting me to address all of you, albeit from the confines of a personal home. I pray that everyone watching is healthy and coping well with the challenging times in which we live. Soon a day will come when we can return to the traditional in-person warm water and rubber chicken conference luncheons. In the meantime, we're all forging a tiny semblance of normalcy thanks to video technology. I sure hope this goes well. One issue before I jump into specific communication policy matters, I absolutely must applaud the amazing performance over the last 4 months or so of the US wireless industry. We all owe you a debt of gratitude for having the foresight to invest, build powerful networks, and implement the requisite flexibility to manage vast traffic shifts that have withstood recent surges in use. American wireless providers and those serving the industry should hold their heads high, knowing their efforts helped keep a nation connected through one of its most difficult moments. You all played a part with a continuing role ahead to bring comfort, information, and well-being to the people of the Mid-Atlantic states. With that said, let's delve into some policy issues at the FCC that I hope may be of interest to this distinguished group. These days, any substantive conversation about wireless technologies in America has to start with 5G. That is not just because everyone has hyped it to the nth degree, for which I too plead guilty. Instead, 5G is the proper starting point because it's the forefront of our attention, grabbing the bulk of energy and funding from related industry sectors, in turn forcing decisions by applicable regulatory bodies and capturing the imagination and interest of consumers. What is truly exciting about 5G is that people can see in it the future come to life. It represents the culmination of what once was only imagined in Hollywood movies, a universe where wireless technology is embedded and ingrained in nearly everything. A 5G wireless world will no longer be about one siloed device carried in a pocket or purse. If the internet served to connect people and places through specialized devices, 5G will take it a step further to serve as the first real wireless standard to seamlessly connect everything else. The applications are nearly endless: industrial, manufacturing, enterprise, home, transportation, recreation. And it effectively enables technologies that have been sitting on the verge of success for quite a while, including augmented and virtual reality, holograms, esports, and autonomous cars, to name a few. I'll give you a timely analogy. Local officials recently reopened our neighborhood parks, and my 2-year-old was mesmerized when we first ventured through the gates. The wonderment and unlimited possibilities that lay before her led to wide eyes and an open mouth. That's how we should all feel about 5G. As you know all too well, the definition of 5G is constantly evolving as the standard-setting process progresses with each new release. At the most basic level, with 5G, we should expect to experience massive increases in speed and capacity and far lower latency. All will greatly enhance the consumer experience. But when we examine those changes in the works, releases 16 and 17 new radio or NR, it is clear that the benefits extend far beyond individual consumer phone speeds to the entire commercial sector as well. More specifically, these releases are designed to establish the technical parameters for more complex use cases. Release 16, for example, sets standards for many key aspects such as integrated wireless access and backhaul, new radio and unlicensed spectrum, industrial Internet of Things, and ultra-reliable low latency communication, along with intelligent transportation systems and vehicle-to-anything communications. In other words, backhaul, unlicensed, IoT, and cars are 4 areas expected to experience heavy 5G consumption. Well, many of you are starting to plan and build 5G networks to meet the insatiable consumer demand for all things wireless. The Commission continues to forge forward on one of its key primary obligations to the American people, managing the nation's spectrum resources. This daunting task is becoming even more difficult as we seek the necessary bandwidth to deploy next generation services in an environment where the optimal frequencies have already been allocated to others. This is even more true when it comes to identifying much sought after mid-band spectrum. Having led the Commission's review and reform of our previously flawed 3.5 gigahertz priority access license rules, I'm almost giddy that these PALs will be auctioned starting on July 23rd, a short 2 weeks from now. The PALs will be the first new mid-band licenses for 5G and other innovative uses. And there's reason for excitement. An impressive 271 applicants have qualified to bid in the auction. The potential bidders include mobile and fixed wireless providers of all sizes, cable operators, electric companies, manufacturers, universities, investment groups, individuals, and many others. My ultimate vision was to ensure that the PALs were attractive to a diverse set of potential users. It appears that introducing the tried and true concepts of longer license terms, renewability, common sense-based license areas, and normal auction procedures where all licensees would be available, among others, accomplish this goal. Nonetheless, it is premature to speculate on who will place bids, which markets will have the greatest demand, who will ultimately win licenses, and for how much. Well, we leave that to the auction magic to decide. We do know that 7 10 megahertz PALs will be available in New Jersey's 21 counties and New York's 62 counties, and the other 3150 counties throughout the United States. All interested bidders will be eligible to acquire up to 40 megahertz of the 70 available in each particular county. Of course, due to the band's 3-tiered innovative and experimental structure, PAL holders will still have to protect incumbent uses such as US Navy radar, so potential bidders must perform their due diligence. But thanks to the Spectrum Access System, or SAS, if an incumbent does turn on operations, it will receive protection from harmful interference, and the PAL will automatically be reassigned to a new channel in the lower 100 megahertz of the band if available. For those of you who do not envision needing priority access or do not want to expend the resources to participate in the auction, Spectrum is still available to you under the General Authorized Access, or GAA. This 80 megahertz of unlicensed like spectrum is already available through one of the 5 SAS providers, with more moving through the approval process as we speak. So far, this spectrum is being used to provide both innovative commercial services and private enterprise solutions for the education, healthcare, and manufacturing sectors. The Commission will follow up with the release of the CBR spectrum with an auction for the majority of the existing C-band, or the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz band. This is another long-standing project of mine, having started working on it 4 years ago and led the charge since then to make this premier band available for advanced wireless services such as 5G. It's been an extremely difficult issue from the first conceptual conversation years ago, so to have reached this point where we now stand through all of the twists and turns, it is exciting and gratifying, I must admit. To give you a bit more detail about where we are in the process, just last February, the Commission finally voted to reallocate and auction the 280 megahertz of spectrum for terrestrial broadband, while preserving the upper 200 megahertz for satellite incumbents and their contractees. At the same time, we sought comment on the auction procedures for these 14 20 megahertz licenses in each of the 406 partial economic areas, or Ps. Luckily for the wireless industry, the heavy lifting on transition plans and relocation expenses lies squarely with the satellite companies and those that use their services. While petitions for reconsideration have been filed and some satellite companies unsuccessfully pursued a stay in the DC circuit, we are on track for a December auction. Under the Commission's plan, 100 megahertz in 46 of the 50 largest markets must be completely cleared by December 5th, 2021. And all 280 in the all markets and by the same date in 2023. While this may not have been my preferred path, it is consistent with my main principles in executing the C-band transition. Chairman Pai has committed to an auction this year. The incumbents are protected in the reconfigured band. The auction will release a huge portion of spectrum for innovative new purposes, and the satellite providers are participating voluntarily. What I've just discussed, however, represents the past. Those spectrum bands already in the works or close to being allocated for new next generation purposes. Not to shortchange those efforts in any way, but the question you should be asking yourself is, what's the next act? Almost everyone acknowledges that what's been done to date is not enough for the future. And they are correct. We cannot afford to rest on our laurels or stop working hard to bring other bands into the spectrum pipeline. Almost all experts agree that the Commission must find upwards of 500 to 800 megahertz of additional spectrum for commercial licensed purposes in the next 3 to 5 years. I'll throw out a couple to consider. Top of the list, the next bands is 3.1 to 3.55 gigahertz. It currently houses a number of Department of Defense radar systems and has been identified by Congress for possible commercial purposes. I've made the argument of this 450 megahertz block. Upwards of 200 must be cleared and go towards meeting our insatiable demand for licensed spectrum. I know the upper 100 can be repurposed without much heartburn, and we can work through the second 100 the same way. As for the remaining 250 megahertz in the lower portion of the band, the bulk of it, at minimum, must be shared, as in the 3.5 gigahertz tiered structure priorities. This would protect the DoD purposes while opening these portions of 5G as well. After this band, the identification of potential options becomes much more complicated. I have initiated the necessary conversations with industry experts, including manufacturers, providers, academia, and others to help determine which frequencies are most ideal for future purposes. For example, I think it's not unreasonable to have further dialogue with applicable and interested parties on the much debated 12 gigahertz band. It would certainly seem appropriate to explore the relevant issues here. Similarly, 7 gigahertz should provide an opportunity for possible licensed operations. There are also a couple other bands being privately discussed, but are not necessarily ready for prime exposure just yet, or maybe they never will be. Accordingly, if anyone out there has any ideas or is aware of any magical bands previously not discussed, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Turning to my last policy issue, I think it's especially appropriate, given this crowd, to provide an update on efforts to stop the diversion of consumer-paid 911 fees by state and local governments. It's a tale of good news and bad news. The good news is that, save for any backsliding, the pool of diverting states is now just down to 4. It's been a long time coming, requiring a lot of conversations and letters, and even the threat of losing critical federal funding. Just months ago, West Virginia officials led by Governor Justice changed their state statute to finally end the state's diversionary practices. Puerto Rico did the same by codifying the dedicated allocation of its collected fees and restricting expenditures to proper purposes under the law. The bad news, and I expect I will shock no one in this audience, is that both New York and New Jersey continue to cement their positions, remaining squarely on the committed diverter list. While the other 2 states, Nevada and Rhode Island, are either relatively new to the practice or have flirted with doing the right thing, New York and New Jersey have said they have absolutely no interest in making changes, or at other times have made up hair-splitting justifications for practices the Commission experts have repeatedly rejected. To put this in context, New Jersey and New York account for 175.5 million of the total 187 million diverted in 2018, or a whopping 93.9%, according to the Commission's last report. Your leaders are unwavering in their commitment to steal these vital funds. They can't be swayed by underfunded call centers or outdated technology. They don't seem to care that they're no longer eligible for federal monies. Well, if I've learned anything about my time serving in the Commission, and specifically in this fight, it's that no real substantive changes come easy. Let it be known, I will use every tool at my disposal to force needed change in these states' practices, and will not stop until the Commission is able to submit a clean report to Congress stating that there are no diverting states. I thank each and every one of you who's willing to join me in this fight. So that's probably a lot more ground cover than you were expecting from me. And there are so many other issues I could discuss, like macro towers. I'll save that for the Q&A or the next time we hopefully will be able to meet in person. Until then, all my best to you and your families. Thank you so very much for letting me speak to you.
Rob,
Yep.
you're all set.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. And especially, I want to give a shout out to Dominic Valleco, our New Jersey Wireless Vice President, who you know and has been the champion of the 911 diversion of funds issue. So thank you for mentioning that. And we will keep working on this. It's been, as you know, almost eight years now, but we're still working on it. I want to get to the Q&A now. First, a couple of things just to give you, let our audience sort of know you a little better. Talk about where you grew up and, even more important, your favorite baseball and football teams.
Okay, starting with the hard ones, I see. I grew up outside of Buffalo, New York, a town called Lockport. It's right on the Erie Canal. Give or take, city proper about 30,000, and the county has another 30, give or take. So a very interesting place, a wonderful place to grow up. Definitely challenged by the weather. I'll give you that, and good lessons to be had from those experiences. And I miss it sometimes, I must admit, in the summertime as it hits the 100 degrees here in Washington, D.C. Not quite this year, but almost every year. But in terms of sports, I love my sports. I am a diehard Yankee fan. My dad and I used to watch Yankee games together. We went to a couple, but it was far travel for us. But we used to watch them on WPIX, in New York. We'd catch them on TV. Phil Rizzuto, if anyone, those days. And so that was kind of a bonding moment for my dad and I. And then I'm a Bills fan, I must admit. So you Giants have hurt me over the years. The Jets, not too much for all you out there. We were happy to be in the same division. It's too bad that the Patriots are as well. So I love my sports. I'm looking forward to hopefully that we'll get some later this year in some form or fashion.
All right. Thank you very much. 5G, you had mentioned 5G at the opening of your remarks, and obviously a near and dear to our heart subject here. You are probably, and you and I talked about this, following some of the small cell bill legislation that is working its way in the States. In New Jersey, we have a bill introduced that is going to in the committee process now. In New York State, they are working on getting some bills introduced and in the committee. Can you give us your thoughts on that, and what can our members and member companies do to help support this legislation and 5G deployment?
Well, we are going to need the help from the legislature in both states. We're also taking action at the federal level. We've moved a number of pieces to make it easier to site towers, to place small antennas, to do all the requisite things that are necessary to make 5G deployable and operational. And so we're working hard on that. We're calling on Congress as well. I've worked with my former friends on Capitol Hill to bring forward new legislation that will make it easier as well. So anything that you can do to amplify the need for legislation is helpful. The commission does have authority and is using that, but it's being challenged all the time. I think we'll survive court proceedings on a number of items, but it's always helpful to have a very clear path of what the policymakers would like from us. In terms of another thing you can do is add those personal experiences, highlight exactly the problems you're facing, and get those to us, and make sure we know where the sticking points are. I've been in Virginia and been out to places to try to ease situations, and we can do the same in both New York and New Jersey. How can we solve particular problems that are being faced, and how can we target our action to make sure they're addressing the needs that you all are having in terms of building out our very important network?
Thank you. And another issue that both New York and New Jersey face, even though New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country, and New York City obviously is the largest city in the country, we have a lot of geography. And we have a lot of rural communities in both states that I want to say are maybe on the wrong side of the digital divide. And I know the FCC is working on addressing this area. Can you talk about that and then give us some ideas how we can help you?
Well, it's a very interesting dynamic because one of the early things that Chairman Pai did of the FCC, that in 2017, was to work with New York State and the governor and allocate particular money to New York State to build out in their model of what they wanted to see happen. That money's been allocated and built out, and hopefully we're in a better state. But actually, that still leaves pockets of unserved population that now become back onto our challenge to help resolve. And New Jersey definitely has rural parts that need to be addressed, and broadband access is a big issue, not only there but everywhere. And so we're working really hard at the commission. We have a number of new programs we stood up. They'll make operational. We're making available $16 billion for a reverse auction that will be held in late October of this year to deal with those areas that have nothing, those unserved areas. And there's many, that you talk about today in your two states, those places where it's not even dial up, and how do we get service to those? And the number changes depending on who you count, but we know it's at least 18 million Americans don't have broadband today. It's probably much higher, probably 20, 22 million people don't have service, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with that issue. At the same time, we're fighting policies from folks that are what I would consider bad direction. I was reading this morning that Mayor de Blasio wants to take money from that he's supposedly saving from the police department cuts that he's made and put that towards broadband in the city. And his argument is, there are people that are being underserved, and that underserved means that they don't have multiple providers, or they have multiple providers, but he doesn't think that the price is quite acceptable. He wants to divert $157 million for this purpose. I've got, like I said, 22 million Americans who have nothing, and he wants someone to have a fourth or fifth wireless provider, or fourth or fifth broadband provider, excuse me. We're also working at the commission to stand up our subsidy programs for wireless networks and make sure that wireless is ubiquitous throughout the nation. That's not an easy task. Our maps have been quite poor. We've got to work through those issues. So we're working really hard to make those things happen. At the same time, when we have people trying to do overbuilding, it makes the challenge even more difficult.
The auction you referred to, is that the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or is that a different auction? Or
no, that's absolutely it. That's phase one of RDOF, October 29th. It kicks off, probably run a good number of weeks. Like I said, we're going to give out somewhere around, up to $16 billion. Any money we don't spend then, we'll put onto phase two. And phase two is the harder challenge. Phase two is, how do you deal with those areas where some parts are served and other parts aren't? And under our previous counting mechanism, we treated the whole area as served if somebody got service in the area. That's not a great way to go about it. The maps and the data weren't meant for the purpose that we're using today, and so we're fixing all of that. But we have to go back and fix those areas where partially served blocks are being counted as fully served, even knowing that there's lots of people in there, lots of houses, lots of Americans who need our help. And so RDOF phase one is a big piece of that. And we're talking about using the reverse auction to go from $30 billion budget down to 16. That's how valuable we think the reverse auction can be, and how effective it can be in terms of reducing the subsidy necessary to serve these areas.
Okay, thank you. That sounds terrific. Along those same lines, I've been following one of the applications with 5G is Telehealth. And I noticed the CARES Act had allocated funding for telehealth, for equipment, for services, for software. Can you tell us some of the results and what do you think the plans are going forward?
Well, it's a really exciting program that we actually just completed yesterday. $200 million was made available under the CARES Act by Congress. And we did a number of different phases and have allocated all of the money to different purposes. And here the Congress wanted a very broad sweep of what the money could be spent with. Our existing rules and our existing programs limit mostly to service itself. Here they were allowing money to go towards devices and infrastructure, a number of different pieces that we don't deal with traditionally. And so all of the money has been allocated, and now it's about getting the money out the door and getting it used in the communities that have won awards. We've had some early successes in terms of what it's, telehealth's been able to connect a number of locations and families that would be susceptible to more problems if they went into a hospital or a doctor setting. And so it's also reduced the costs of providing diagnosis and assistance along the way. So really important, impressive technology use going forward. It's something that we've already been using in the past, and now we're going to use even more going forward. I think you're going to see telehealth become a new normal in our system. It's no longer going to be about just unique cases. It's going to be probably more the typical use. I was just noticing my pediatrician has made clear that they're not going to have waiting rooms anymore, and that we're going to wait in the parking lot. And I imagine that going forward, we won't even do that, and we'll do telehealth and then have first diagnosis in that situation as well. So really exciting. The money's got to get out there and be spent. And then we do know there's great interest in the Congress to add even more money along this path. We have an existing program that's really kind of problematic, and this has just actually been a cleaner way to go about it. And so really excited about where it's going. I spent a ton of time on healthcare in my past life. That Tom indicated some of that, and my time on Capitol Hill. I did a lot of time in healthcare. A lot of members have been really interested in telehealth, and we're finally past that point. It's sad that it had to take a pandemic to get here, but now we're seeing the benefits of it.
Great work. Thank you. Want to go back, follow up on something you had mentioned in your remarks, and that's the CBRS auction and the C-band. The interest in the CBRS auction, at least from my standpoint and in my circle, seems to be much more than expected. Do you think that's due to the power differences, or you're just not sure what the interest in C-band is going to be? Can you elaborate a little more?
Well, a couple things. One, we haven't gotten to C-band deadlines yet to know who all is interested in that. But there are power limits on CBRS are a factor, but I don't think that's increased the interest. I think it's probably going to at some point, be concerned and something we need to fix. But to your point, we have had great interest. 271 applicants have been qualified for our auction to be held in July 23rd, 2 weeks from now. Really exciting stuff. It's a very diverse population, from the big guys to the small guys and everyone in between. I saw there were 4 universities on the list. And so really interesting on what CBRS may be used for. It's also they call it the innovators band, the experimental band, because you have the 3-tier structure. But what I think it is something, why it's exciting now is it's something that's right before us. And you can see and account for the auction. They're in smaller license blocks by county instead of, some of the other pieces that, we typically go for. We obviously had to increase the size. We went from really micro sizes to counties to try and make sure that everybody's interests were protected. And that fix certainly didn't depress interest at all. So I'm really excited. And we'll just let the auction go where it wants. 271 applicants, and have no idea what it's going to be. It could be a couple winners, or it could be a very diverse universe. And just excited to see in the coming months or weeks to see what the outcome is.
Okay. Thank you. We're starting to get a few questions in from the audience, and just
Sure.
and I had noticed this the other day. There's an NPRM out about reallocating the T-band spectrum.
So we're required by law, something I worked on in 2012, to auction off the T-band by 2022. So we have that burden, and we've done our work at the commission. There is legislation that's moving in the Congress to either delay or end that auction and make sure the T-band doesn't go for what it used, because there are a number of metro markets, you all know better than I, the dozen or so markets where it's used today for public safety. There is an opportunity, I think, and a need to address other bands that aren't as popular as part of this, and deal with the issue that I mentioned in my speech and that you and I have worked on for so long, the 911 fee diversion. So I think there's a package of things, solve the T-band, make sure it doesn't harm the circumstance we're talking about, deal with some other public safety spectrum that's really not being used all that efficiently, and then deal with 911 fee diversion in both New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Nevada. So those are things I think that could be part of a package, and I've been talking to congressmen and senators about that.
Thank you. And just mentioning 911 again, just FYI, and I think I had noted to you that New Jersey finally has an RFP on the street now for next gen 911 for the EZNet. Obviously, that's going to be complicated with the budget situation and COVID, but we'll keep you informed. So we may need your help again to.
Oh yeah, I'll be back. I was reading the recent budget decisions and some of the cuts that were outlined, and I noticed they made some provisions for a new golf course. So it's a very interesting legislature that you have there in New Jersey.
Yes, yeah, it's an interesting process. We'll keep you informed as the small cell bill. And before we let you go, you've been very gracious with your time. Sort of your crystal ball. You have more than a crystal ball where you sit, but can you talk about the 6 gigahertz band and the plans for spectrum there?
Yeah, so we've been very active and have allocated 6 gigahertz. I anticipate that the devices it could be implemented as late as this year. And so we have a couple challenges in the courts. That's traditional when we have big ticket items like this. So unlicensed and 6 gigahertz is going forward. We at the same time have to address the very low power situation. So we kind of had 3 different projects we were working on in unlicensed and 6 gigahertz. Well, at the same time, protecting those incumbents that are using it today. So how do we balance those things? We've done, yeoman's work by our engineering team to make sure that those who are using it today for fixed wireless, public safety, a number of different purposes are fully protected. But we can introduce unlicensed into the band, 3 different type of unlicensed to be worked on. We have 2 that we've already approved, and we really need to deal with what's known as very low power. It's these 1 meter type situations, kind of the Star Trekky devices that we're really trying to bring forward. Very, very low power that shouldn't have any problematic need, and we actually wanted to extend the record to make sure we got it absolutely right. So I think we'll be able to do that by the end of this year, and then we're going to let the innovators and the entrepreneurs and the investors and the public really decide where this goes. What are they going to use with unlicensed? At the same time, like I said, protecting those that are already in the band. And for those, that I talked about, that's an unlicensed portion we talked about. There's a lot of things I talked about in my comments that hopefully people will pick up on. 12 gigahertz, 7 gigahertz, and anything else that people come to mind in terms of the need for for licensed spectrum. We need more commercial licensed spectrum for our number of wireless providers that are out there bringing service to Americans. At 3.1 to 3.55 at the top of my list. So we've got a lot of work to do in the coming months and years ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. We'll support you any way we can. You can sign off for now. Thanks. I will thank from all of our members and member companies and sponsors, Commissioner O'Reilly, on behalf of New Jersey and New York Wireless Association. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks so very much.
Okay. And just, I'll do one last wrap up. Thank you. Again, just a note, we will be posting the video and we'll try to actually get some answers to some of these questions we did not get to. So give us a couple of days to get some answers to some of these questions that came in. Thank you for your support. Just want to note one last item. We are, as Tom had mentioned, we are working, this is a first of a series. We are already working on number 2 and number 3 in the series. So look for something in the next week or 2. Also, hopefully, we all know we want to get back to live events and meeting and working together. And if all things go as planned, and we know how that works recently, New Jersey Wireless, we should be having our annual charity golf event on September 1st at Forsgate Country Club. They are back in service. They have catering, right now it's outdoors, so we will keep you informed, but we should have an announcement out in the next week or 2 on that also. So thank you very much. We'll sign off for now. And again, look for the video to be posted on the New Jersey and the New York State Wireless Association's website. Thank you, everyone.